Saying our names. I'm Debbie.
Kyle.
Laura.
Shabana.
Liat.
Julia.
Lainey. Sue.
Gretchen. Susan.
Karen.
Leslie.
And on the screen, Ketson, Erica, Barbara, Christine, Kathy, Morgan, Diane, Marianne, Linda, Ariel, and Romaine. Welcome, everybody. So I have a few announcements. We're going to be meeting here next week to conclude studying the forms, and then there'll be a 2-week break from our Tuesday, Thursday Sangha, but Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning sitting will continue. Let's see, and then in January, we'll begin studying the Sandakai, which is the harmony of difference and equality with Suzuki Roshi. So I was going to talk to you a little bit today about bowing, one of our forms. And I think of bowing, I think of Zazen, Kinhin, and bowing kind of being all in the same realm. What Reb Anderson has to say about bowing says that many Western students of Zen have some resistance to the formal practice of bowing, especially the practice of full prostration. This resistance can manifest itself as an unwillingness to practice the bow or in being overly enthusiastic. The practice of bowing offers an opportunity for cutting through all the dualities of self and other, sentient being and Buddha. In our tradition, we have a formal verse that we sometimes recite while bowing. The one who is bowing, the one who is bowed to, their nature, no nature, my body, other's body, not two, plunging into the inexhaustible vow, living in harmony with all. Suzuki Roshi said that when we bow, we're giving up ourselves, which means giving up our dualistic ideas. So there's no difference between Zazen practice, Kinhin practice, and bowing. He said, bowing is a very serious practice. You should be prepared to bow even in your last moment. Even though it is impossible to get rid of our self-centered desires, we have to do it. Our true nature wants us to. Dogen said, as long as there is true bowing, the Buddha way will not deteriorate. In bowing, we totally pay respect to the all-pervading virtue of wisdom, which is the Buddha. And as Dogen is wont to do, he goes on to give some very specific instructions. In making the bow, we should neither move hastily nor sluggishly, but simply maintain a reverent mind and humble attitude. When we bow too fast, the bow is then a casual thing. Perhaps we're even hurrying to get it over with. This is frequently a result of a lack of reverence. On the other hand, if the bow is too slow, then it becomes rather pompous. We may have gotten too attached to the feeling of bowing or our own real or imagined gracefulness of movement. This is to have lost the humble attitude which a true bow requires. When we bow, it's also always accompanied by gassho, placing our hands together. There are a variety of different ways that we bow. I think that the two main kinds are the standing bow is one. We use that when we enter the zendo. We generally bow and step in first with the foot closest to the hinge of the door, which is usually the left foot. The body is erect and the weight distributed evenly and the feet parallel to each other. When the bow is made, the body bends at the waist so that the torso forms an angle with the legs of approximately 45 degrees. The hands do not move relative to the face, but remain in position and move only with the body. So we're not like doing this, which I got corrected on. So the space, I've always heard like two fists is about the space, and that space remains the same throughout your bow in both sitting and standing. The deep bow or the full prostration. This is used more in ceremonies, and you'll see it more in monasteries. Some of us do full bows. Some people cannot do full bows. I would say, generally speaking, if you can't sit on a cushion, you probably would have a lot of difficulty with a full bow. It's more formal than a standing bow and requires a continuous concentration during its execution that it is not sloppily done. The bow itself begins in the same way as the standing bow, but once the body is bent slightly from the waist, the knees bend and one assumes a kneeling position. From the kneeling position, the movement of the torso continues with the hands separating and moving, palms up in a position parallel with the forehead. As the bowing movement progresses, the back of the hands come to rest just above the floor, and the forehead is lowered until it rests upon the floor between the hands. At this point, the body is touching the floor at the knees, elbows, hands, and forehead. The hands are then slowly raised, palms up, to a point just above the ears. And this is symbolic of placing the Buddha's feet above one's head. And it's an act of reverence and humility. There should be no sharp, abrupt movements of the hands or arms, no bending of the wrists or curling of the fingers. In kneeling, actually, the knees do not touch the ground simultaneously, but in sequence. The same is true for the right and left hands, right and left elbows. I find full bows a little challenging, especially when I have my robes on. I have an irrational fear, and I've already done it, that when I go to get back up, I will be stepping on my robe. And I have done that a couple times. So there's a lot of coordination. When priests do full bows with the bow, we have a bowing mat so that the okesa never touches the ground. So you're supposed to kind of, the okesa, the robe wrapped around our sitting robe, is supposed to be lifted up so that we don't kneel on the okesa. So it takes some coordination and some balance. And yeah, I have found it challenging, but I'm working on it. Other times that we bow, when we're in an all-day sit or a sesshin, we're maintaining silence and we're not having eye contact. But if you're walking on the path and someone is walking towards you, as you get within a couple feet of each other, you stop and bow to each other. And that's it's just an acknowledgement. You know, I see a Buddha. I have also used bowing at different times when I was working as a physical therapist. I used to bow in the morning before I would go to work, and I would sort of, think about the people who were on my schedule that day. And when I came home, I would bow out and sometimes, offer some words or some encouragement or something based on the interactions that I had that day. And I found that what that did for me is it created a container so that when I came home and I bowed out, I wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
I was now at home and I wasn't needing necessarily to worry about people. I also have gotten in the habit, and I don't know where I got this from, of whenever I see a dead animal on the road, I'll do a little gush out. I'm trying to train my dogs, but they're not consistent. You know how they do that actually they call it an invitation to play when they do that bow. But I've been trying to get them to do it in the morning to me before I put their food bowls down, but they're not really getting it. It's just, yeah, it's just a very sweet way of just embodying compassion, I think, saying, I see you, I see the Buddha in you. Does anybody have any questions about any forms? I don't know that I can answer everything, but I'll answer what I can.
You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
said that thing when you're at a retreat and you're in silence and you are coming towards a person. Like the retreats that I've done at Spirit Rock, you just don't even look at all.
Right, but you can, peripherally, you can see that the person's there.
Exactly, but
Yeah.
so is that sort of an encouraged thing in general? Like if I'm at that place that we have retreats.
Yes, that place.
I can't remember the name.
The open sky.
Thank you, yes.
It's an acknowledgement. So like you don't walk up and face the person. You're
Sure,
like parallel. Yeah. You're just acknowledging
Okay.
their Buddha. Did you have a question?
Yes, Mary Ann gave us a talk on forms. And she talked about bowing, and ever since then I've been confused because when Chris comes up and does her first bows, I thought Mary Ann said we should not bow with her then, but then she does the second.
Yeah, the second set we don't bow with.
Okay, so it's the first set that we
We
do
do.
bow.
Yeah.
And it's the second set that we don't.
Okay. And honestly, I'm not sure why, but I do know that the reason we do 3 bows is we do a bow for Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Nice.
Anybody on screen have any questions?
Here.
Mary Ann, don't ask me something.
I'm not going to ask you to have a comment to the other comment there. I don't know for sure about why we bow with the doshi on the first set, but not the second. But what I make up from what I observe is that the first set, we're all doing it. We're all offering ourselves completely to the Buddha and honoring. And on the second set, we're kind of going to be getting ready to chant, because the Kokyo announces the chant when the doshi begins their third bow on their own, and we start chanting, and the doshi just finishes their bows. So I think, I see it that way. Whether I'm right or wrong, who the heck knows? But I think it's because we're preparing for chanting that's going to support, but the doshi does another offering, maybe an offering, I don't know what all, further offering for the benefit of all beings. I don't know.
Right. That's probably right, because I was thinking about that and at like Tassajara, that's the time we're passing the chant books back. So that makes sense. Yeah. I will accept your explanation.
That makes sense. I like that.
Ariel.
This might be nitpicky, but I've been confused because if I'm being do on, or mostly do on, I guess, or tenkin sometimes, I've seen some people have a one-hand gasho, or when they're passing chant books or something. Is that real?
I have done when I was in a Sangha, and it didn't seem insane at the time, but now it seems insane, where one person was the Kokyo, the Doan, and the Kugyo. So you couldn't bow with 2 hands. Other than that, I don't know that there's any significance to only having 1 hand up.
So that's not like it kind of feels like it doesn't count. I guess I'll have to
Well, I would say my preference would be both hands, but possible there may be a time when you don't have both hands available.
Well, if you're ringing the bell,
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Then-
yeah,
I've seen people, I concerts frequently,
It's
but
like
yeah.
an
It's
intention.
It
not
is an
about how many
intention,
hands, it's
yeah.
about your intention.
okay,
Okay.
right, got it.
This is
Okay.
all I
Back
can
to the
do.
intention. Thank you.
Okay. Savannah,
If you can't do a full prostration and you're bowing, are you also putting your hands up?
some people do, yeah, you can bow down and then do this symbolic raising of the Buddha's feet.
Okay.
want to be first?
Yeah, I'm going to be first. With the prostration, you said something about you don't do it simultaneously, or do you do it simultaneously? I missed.
It looks like you do, but unless you have really good muscle control, you like slam on the ground. So, not that I've done that, but no, actually it's like one then the other,
One than the
but
other.
it's so close.
Is it right first, or does it matter?
I don't think it matters. It just depends on how your body works.
And the elbow goes with it after that. So then the right elbow goes down.
Yeah,
So-
and I think the reason both don't go down at the same time, like I said, is it would require a lot more muscle control to do it that way than to do one at a time.
Hard on the knees.
Yeah, yeah.
A similar question. So, you're not supposed to use your hands just this is the full prostration.
Mhm.
Is it correct not to use your hands when you drop down? You need to just get your knees down and then do.
Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about
It's
it,
very hard to do.
I do use my hands.
Well, I've been watching everybody, of course.
Yeah, there's very,
It
you know, it
seems
depends
like
on,
most people use their hands to
Yeah.
support their upper body. Because otherwise you would have to have really a lot of.
Yes.
Leg strength in the.
I think a lot of these things get adapted to how our bodies are working at the time. I'm sure that like an 18-year-old monk wouldn't have any problem at all going right down on his elbows, but yeah, for most of us. I'm just trying really hard not to step on my robe or fall over.
Problem would be getting back up.
Huh?
Getting back up.
I'm
would be the
telling
issue.
you, it would. And it's only been recently that I've had trouble with that. I think part of it is in the ceremonies with the robe and I don't know, I've just become self-conscious. And I think I've also had some physical problems that limit me a little bit. So I'm not quite as confident.
Can we shorten your robe for you in the front?
Well, you know what I said to Chris? I said, would you mind very much if I just wore like a hapari and wore my okesa over it? Because Norman does that. And I did that once or twice, but I just can't decide how I feel about it. You know, I think as a priest, I need to wear my okesa, but I don't think I necessarily need to wear a robe. So I'm on the fence.
You'll figure it out.
I'll figure it out, or I'll fall down figuring it out. Diane,
We'll be there to catch.
You said you bow 3 times. One was for Buddha, the last was for Sangha. What was the middle one? I didn't hear it.
Dharma, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ken-san.
So speaking of your working with your robes, I was taught by my teacher at the Zen Center that just with a rakusu, doing a full bow, the rakusu shouldn't touch the floor either.
Correct.
And there's I sort of figured out, she didn't really get specific with me, my teacher, like how you manage that. But she said you kind of just are aware of your rakusu and try to keep it sort of against your body and so that it doesn't flop onto the ground, onto the floor.
Yeah, I've seen some people tuck it, if it's long enough, tuck it into their pants a little bit or into their robe, or just kind of have one hand over as you're going down so it doesn't
If I
flop.
do one hand down, that's okay.
Yeah.
Complicated.
Oh, yes.
Debbie, as a PT, would you recommend doing full bows as a way to improve physical fitness?
Uh-oh,
Uh-oh.
that's a Benny.
Can I check my malpractice insurance? No, I think whole body activities like, I think of bowing, like swimming is a whole body activity, walking. I think they're really powerful when your entire body is in it, provided you can do it safely and not hurt yourself. And depending on where you are physically, you might need to do some strengthening first, but I don't know. I really like full bows. That's just me. Anyone else? Okay, so, small groups. This is where you're my small group person, right?
Yeah, turn off the recording. Turn off.
Three, I think.
Now I have three, groups of three. Do we have, right? I have to count.